Hi, everyone. Welcome back into another episode of Bruins Tape to Tape. I'm your host this evening, Caroline, and I'm joined by my ever lovely co-host, Maria. How's it going, Maria?
It's going well. We've got so much to talk about. Who would have thunk it? On July
Oh,
2nd,
I
we'll
know.
be celebrating Independence Day with the bang, thanks to hopefully thanks in part to Don Sweeney.
Yes. I think everybody this is the most exciting. Everyone is super excited about this year's free agency because we've not been able to see any money get spent for quite a long time. We're finally out of the proverbial bubble or not bubble, but hole in the ground that the league was finding itself in because of lost revenue and all that stuff. And so all that's been made back. And it was a record setting free agency day. If anybody was on Twitter, social media, following the news in a variety of places, it was nonstop updates of new contracts signed, lots of money to go around. And this was the first time ever that all of the new contracts published on the first day of free agency exceeded $1 billion. So a lot of money to be had. Plenty of teams that have perhaps not been aggressive or have not been spending their money finally spending their money. So that's a good thing. It's great to see the shakeup. Because while the parity has been very good over the last few years since the cap was instituted, I think we all wanted to see some more movement of players all over the league. So, what did you think, Maria? How did that make you
Well,
feel?
I think we've all been waiting for this day, July 1 and July 2nd, because
Mm-hmm.
we had been hearing for what seemed to be an extended period of time, at least the last couple of seasons,
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of teams were up against it. The cap was expected to go up. It did not go up. There were a couple of off seasons where nobody did anything because
Yep.
they weren't in a financial position to
Mm-hmm.
do so for a
Yep.
variety of reasons, shortened seasons, COVID stoppages,
Yep.
maybe overpaying in some instances by some teams. So the amount of activity that took place on July 1st was like
Mm-hmm.
was like being on a Ferris wheel. There's like,
Yes.
the minute you finished reading about some piece of news, another piece of news
Yeah.
was broken. So
Yeah.
and I think GMs were also waiting for this day
Mm-hmm.
and likely had been planning for it for
Yes.
quite some time, knowing what
Yes.
the cap was going to be for each
Yep.
of their teams, and making in most instances justifiable moves, including our own Don Sweeney,
Yep.
and our own Boston Bruins.
Yes. Yeah.
But
So it
there
was
were
pretty
some
exciting.
shockers. There were some shockers, I must
Yes.
say.
Yes. We'll get into that. Funny enough, as I was trying to search, by hashtags and what have you across social media, I also realized that it was also the first day of free agency for the NBA. So I'm like trying to sort through. I'm like, no, I don't care about that team. No, I don't know who that is. No, give me the NHL info.
Well, just to compare and contrast with some of the contracts that were signed
Yeah.
um, by some of the stars, bona fide stars
Mm-hmm.
in the NHL, with,
Mm-hmm.
I think, was it Jake Gensel
Yes.
leading the
Yes.
pack with the deal that he signed with the Tampa Bay Lightning, a
Mm-hmm.
7-year, $9 million per.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had the announcement of the NBA signings and extensions and Jason Tatum of the Boston Celtics inking a 5-year deal, which will pay him $315 million. So you talk about just the overwhelming difference in revenue streams from one sport to another. That's just Jason Tatum. Doesn't even take into account all of the other NBA players and guys that I call scrubs in the NBA who are making, in some instances, more money than some of the better players in the NHL. So, I know it's all likely relative, but, the NHL, I think, still has a long way to go with revenue streams in order to even come close to the other sports. But
so
still, they made money. They're spending it.
You know what? I'm sure all of the players in all the sports are saying, if you can get it, you should go get it.
Go get it. Yeah. And none of these guys are worrying about paying their utility bills. So
No.
let me get that out there. I'm just kind of pointing out just the irony of, look at us, we're spending all this money, this is awesome. And then you hear this contract and you're like, oh.
Yep. Yeah, for folks who can't do super fast math in their heads, that $315 million contract for 5 years means he's getting paid $63 million a year. And to put that into perspective, the highest paid player in the NHL is Austin Matthews, and he earns $13.25 million annually.
And
literally $50 million.
He plays hockey. The other guy plays basketball.
Exactly.
So I think there's, I'm not, listen.
Wild.
I live in Boston. I'm a Boston fan. Congratulations to the Boston Celtics for winning a championship. But you play basketball, not hockey.
I know. Some other news that was released earlier today, the 2024-2025 season schedule has been released. So it means we are that much closer because technically speaking, July 1 is the start of the new year, right? It's New Year's Day. They have their frenzy and then they have released the schedule. So that's really exciting. Did you happen to notice game number 1 for the Boston Bruins?
Yes.
You think whoever the master scheduler is has a perverted sense of humor? We knew they had a sense of humor. Whoever writes that algorithm, because we've seen some pretty funny combinations of schedules in the past. But this year, the season starts on October 8th for the Boston Bruins. It is an away game, and that game is in Florida against the Florida Panthers the day they raise their cup banner to the Rams.
Which gagged me. However, here's my psychology of it. Okay?
Okay.
Our Boston Bruins are going to be standing out there, having to watch that banner raised by a fan base or in front of a fan base who could only muster approximately 200,000 people to go to their parade. Okay, I get it. The weather was atrocious. I don't know if they had a hurricane warning or however 200,000 people. So if that doesn't motivate you when you're standing on their ice, if you're out there or even if you're in the locker room and you're having to watch that team raise a banner, that better kick you right in the ass.
Yes. And I think it will.
And I think it will.
For sure.
Because I've seen it happen before. So that's my hope. That's my hope, and that's my,
Yeah.
silver lining to the fact that really you
Yeah.
pukes at the NHL had to schedule the Bruins to go there and watch them raise this freaking banner.
You know, I think it's going to be a fantastic game, though, in all honesty. I, as just a sidebar, I was certainly pleased after everything was said and done that kind of in retrospect, the Bruins played the best, or they were the best opponent that Florida had in all 4 rounds. They gave them hell, and they really pushed them farther than any other team. And I think that's something to be proud of. I'm proud of that as a fan, because we didn't lay down and die. And hopefully the team also is, feels a little bit better about it. But
No,
that's going to
no,
be
and
great.
you're right. We gave them some shit to think about when they kept
Hmm.
coming back and clawing back and clawing back.
Yep.
And I know you're not an Edmonton Oilers fan, but we do have to give them some degree of
Yes.
credit from coming back
Yeah.
from
Fantastic.
being, and who wasn't rooting for
Hmm.
Edmonton to
Yeah.
to beat the Panthers for a
Yeah.
variety of reasons. I
Hmm.
myself, I love the pure beauty of watching
Mm.
tremendous players
Yeah.
perform.
Yeah.
And, I wanted nothing more than to see Connor McDavid lift a Stanley Cup because he is a generational talent.
Yeah.
We
100%.
one never knows when another player like that is going to come along,
Hmm.
during my lifetime.
Yeah.
And I'm now wondering, was that the one and only chance for him? Because it
You
is
never know.
so hard in our sport that we
Mhm.
love to get there. So
Yep.
hard.
Yeah. And it only gets harder and harder as more teams get added, right? Like, you think about in the past those famous players who, the league is built on, and how many cups they all have. And it's like, yeah, well, there were 20 teams. You had 1 in 20 chance. You had a 1 in 10 chance. You had a 1 in 6 chance of winning the Stanley Cup. Now it's 1 in 32. That's the odds are not in your favor
No,
ever,
they are
really,
not.
right?
They are not. No, no, no. And I mean, you can usually weed out, those that will,
Right.
proverbially be in the bottom tier for the most part.
Right.
But even
Right.
still, even if that's a handful of teams, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
and what this league seems to me that the NHL is striving to do, and I hate to give Gary Bettman any credit for anything, but develop.
Boo,
I know, he's just such a smarmy little weasel.
boo.
Um, but the parity that
Yeah,
is developing in the league makes it good shit to watch pretty
it does.
much night after night.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. 100%. So, the Bruins will have their home opener just 2 days later against the Habs, which is great, on the 10th. So, starting the season off right. And if anybody happened to notice on the calendar for December 1st, there's a special ceremonial game that's happening called the Centennial Game. And that's also against the Habs. And that is the Boston Bruins' actual 100th birthday on that date. So, that I expect will have all kinds of fun extra showiness to it that we got to see quite a bit of this past season for their centennial season. So I hope you get tickets, Maria, so that way you can report back and send me all
No,
sorts of good
well,
pictures.
yeah, my daughter, much against my advice, did renew for the upcoming season. So
Make sure you get tickets to that one. Get
um,
tickets to
we
that
will
game.
we will likely be in attendance for those
Good,
those mar those marquee games. Yep,
good,
those
good,
marquee games.
good. So free agency league wide, biggest surprise from a team perspective. What team surprised you the most, either in a good way or maybe like in a bad way?
Well, I think for me, and I'm likely not alone in this.
Hmm.
we did get some inkling that, Steven Stamkos's time with the Tampa Bay
Mm,
Lightning was coming to an end. The fact that there was some contentious conversations and comments prior
yep.
to the start of last season. There were no
Mm-hmm.
discussions or no conversations that were reported about
Yep.
during the course of the season. And
Mm-hmm.
then to come to the realization that someone who has been a good soldier, who has
Mm,
been a leader, a captain, an excellent player, to
yeah.
have to go and look for another deal, to me,
Yep.
I think makes the Tampa Bay Lightning looks like kind of a shitty organization. And that's not my understanding of the Tampa Bay Lightning. They have
Yeah.
very, very good ownership there.
Mm-hmm.
They have ownership that treats the players well, that treats its season ticket holders well, treats their
Mm-hmm.
fans well. So that to me was a bit of a head scratcher. Like,
Yep.
you let him go. He signs with Nashville for $8 million. Still a very productive player. Yes,
Yeah.
is he getting a little older? Okay, fine.
Right.
But he still scored 40 goals for you. But then you go out and you give Jake Gensel $9 million, and I don't see Gensel as a $9 million a year player. So I have to wonder what's going on in Tampa Bay. And someone in our Discord made a very good point that Stamkos walking in the manner in which he did, or Tampa Bay letting him walk in the manner in which he did, would be the equivalent of the
Mm,
same thing having been done to Patrice Bergeron. And
mm-hmm.
I agree. I agree with that assessment. I
Yep.
don't think that the Boston Bruins, as much as they've done, they've had their share of shady shit in the past.
Yep.
I think with this management group, I won't say ownership group, but with this management group, I would find it hard to believe that that would happen.
Yep.
But the reality is, it's a business, and it once again, reaffirms that we should all remember that
Mm-hmm.
it is a business to the people who are running these businesses. And, you know, they're
Yeah.
where we expect loyalty, maybe we're fooling ourselves
Yeah.
into thinking that there is loyalty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was it also Tampa's not just paying him Gensel a ridiculous amount of money, but then they also actually forked over a 2025 third round pick to Carolina because for me, I said this in our live yesterday. It it seems to me this is the first time that I've seen quite a few um arrangements where players were or their signing rights were traded the day before and then they signed an extension. So it was like an extension via trade. And that was what the Jake Gensel deal was. So he was traded on the 30th and then he signed an extension for that insane amount of money. For
Yeah,
me,
and
I
I'm
would
not I'm
say
not sure how that makes your team better. Letting
yeah, I don't know. I don't
I
know.
mean, they
I don't
haven't
know.
really done much of anything else. Not that right?
Right.
To me, Tampa is not, and I think our friend Mo said it in the Discord, not worried about Tampa, and I agree with them.
Yeah. I don't know we all knew
I
that
mean,
they
they
were
still have
kind of moving in that
Kucherov.
direction. Right. Well, and they then, after, offering to Stamkos what I would consider kind of a bad faith offer because they gave him term, but for $3 million a year, he's 34. And then they turn around and today offered an extension to Victor Hedman, who's a year younger. And he is making, goodness, what is that?
Seven. What's his extension is
Term, 8
seven,
years,
8 years.
7.75. So to me, I would think if I were in Stamkos's position, they made him an offer that he could only refuse, right?
Only refuse, yes.
And then they're giving a guy who is essentially the same age a $3 million pay increase, because Victor Hedman previously had a $4 million cap hit contract, and it's now bumped up to 7.875 for 8 years. So that just seemed, like you said, like it just added a little bit of insult to injury. And so, he did what was his right, and he went to a place and he got $8 million. Yeah, it's a little bit less, but it's $8 million and 4
But he
years.
got it for 4 years.
He'll be 38, right? Like that's fine time to then go and retire. So.
Yeah, and this is not a Tampa Bay Lightning podcast, but all we because we follow, we hear, we listen,
and they're in the division,
right? They've had some issues with the cap in the past because again they went all in, they won those cups, good for them, right? And all we've heard is rebuild, rebuild, rebuild. Why wouldn't you want to rebuild with a guy who's given you everything?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think so. There's got to be more to the story. Maybe more will come out at some point in time, but something just doesn't appear to be right with this whole transition or change.
Yeah, I think if you would assign who gets the from July 1, it would be Tampa, and I would say who gets the is Nashville, because that for me was the biggest surprise. We were kind of joking in our live yesterday, and we've joked on the Discord.
Maybe he likes country music.
I've heard it's a great place to live. But we've kind of been talking for a few weeks now. We're watching Washington and some of the crazy moves. We're like, what are you doing? Like, so they're kind of the crazies of this last free agency. But yeah, Nashville kind of came out of nowhere. I don't think anyone was expecting them to be picking up players left and right. That's where Marchessault ended up as well. So
let me tell you, Barry Trotz knows what he's doing.
Oh,
and
100%.
He knows how to build. Yep. He knows how to build a winning team and develop a winning culture. Yep. And so watch out for the Nashville Predators, folks.
They were good last year, right?
And
I think what the one kind of big observation that I made league wide, and then we'll dive into the Bruins, but two examples of maybe ways you don't manage your cap well after winning a Stanley Cup, because you've got two kind of stories. You have Tampa Bay, who I think was too slow in shedding cap. They weren't shedding it fast enough over a couple of years, and then they are now in that position. And then you have
but they won 3 cups during that.
Right.
Was it 2 or 3? So the risk reward paid off for them. I would take those cups.
Oh, yeah, obviously. I don't feel bad for Tampa Bay. Okay?
No, yeah.
But I think they ended up having to make this kind of really, let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say difficult decision with Stamkos.
I hope it was.
I hope they lost sleep over it. Because I don't think they were not responsibly shedding their cap over time, and all of a sudden now they're in this position. And then Vegas, I think, is probably shedding its cap way too fast because they love to pull that trick. We've seen them do it now twice, and they did it really big last year where they have all of that excess cap.
LTIR, LTIR, baby. Yeah.
Now they have to get into compliance again, right? And now they have to shed guys like crazy, and they're being super aggressive, and they made a first round exit, right? At least for Tampa, when they would shed very gradually, they were still in the mix, right?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
This was the quote unquote worst playoff exit for Tampa in
I don't know how many
5
years. It
years
has
or what
5 or 6
5 years
years. That
when they
probably
got
5
swept in
years.
the first
Yeah,
round. So
right.
like that's
So
not bad.
for a GM, it's like, what do I do? I know I got to do this rebuild, but I got a team here
Yeah.
that's still competing their ass off
Yeah.
and can make a deep run.
Yeah.
So if I start shedding cap, I'm going to look like a fool, right? Because I got a
Yeah.
team. So it's a tough place for a GM to be put in.
Yeah.
I don't feel bad for the Vegas Golden Knights. I feel bad for Bruce Cassidy, old friend Bruce Cassidy, because I think they might be in for a little bit of a rough go. A rough go.
Yeah, being out in the first round the year after winning a cup and now shedding some big guys who were significant parts of that cup run. So we'll see. But
we'll see. Yeah.
Former
But again,
go ahead.
Again, I mean, we can't lose sight of the fact too that teams can still make some trades, right?
Oh, yeah,
so there's still we have a long way to like kind of assessing rosters between now and the start of the season in October. But it's fun to crap on some other teams too for a change.
Oh yeah, for sure. So speaking of, trusting the process, as we kind of talked about before,
Yes.
and that delicate balance of making room, but keeping the future in mind and kind of finding that steady place. The Bruins had quite a few guys head to free agency. I think nobody was surprised to learn that Jake DeBrusk, Matt Grzelcyk, Derek Forbort, Pat Maroon are all signed elsewhere. It's, for me, and maybe you'll disagree, I feel with Jake's departure, it's kind of bittersweet for me because I kind of think, oh, that's a shame that it just didn't work out. But you know what? Like we've said in this episode, and we say all the time, you go where you can make that money. And, we aren't ever in the room and we aren't in the heads of any of these players, and they can have their where they want to go is their prerogative. But it is too bad that the whole thing just didn't work out. And I don't mean just like this past year, but his whole 7 years, I think, just wasn't quite as perfect as I think everybody wanted it to be. And he is the last one from the infamous 2015 draft. So maybe it's a good thing. And that is Don just
burn that draft
forward.
and
move forward, right?
Move forward, move on. Don't ever draft like that again.
Yeah. But
you know what side of the fence I have been on, and I've stated it on more than one occasion. And again, good player, potential has been there from day one. From day one,
right? It's just too bad.
It's just too bad. And whatever the situation is, either professionally, personally,
right?
I don't think that it helped his cause when it was leaked that he had asked for a trade.
Right.
And then the information
from that.
There's no coming back from that, right? You can try to explain it away, and maybe as fans it's unfair of us to hold that against players because he's not the only player, that you hear about. But then you add on top of it the commentary that followed Bruce Cassidy's departure with, Jake, in addition to other players who were being openly critical, complaining of how they were being coached by Bruce. So that, you know, I think it was a point in time where it's like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, you can excuse all of that or forget
Yeah.
about all of that if you are consistently performing to
Yeah.
your ability. But for
Yep.
me, when I see you're in a contract year this past season. This was
Yep.
your opportunity to show us, show yourself, show
Mm-hmm.
management, okay? I'm worth the investment. And he wasn't able to do that
Yep.
consistently throughout the course of the season. And I understand, I know that he was being asked to play in different situations
Right.
and being asked to take on more responsibility. But
Right.
again, that was your opportunity to say, I can handle this. And
Right.
I'm not sure that he could.
Yeah.
And I think it will do him well.
Mm-hmm.
Fresh
Yeah.
start, closer to home, closer to his family.
Exactly. So, because I don't want to talk too much about these guys because they're dead to us now. But
We thank them. We thank
we
them.
thank them for their
We
service.
thank them. Thank you for your time. Thank you for
Yep.
your efforts. Thank you
Yep.
for your contributions. But
Yes.
I'm okay with saying
Goodbye.
goodbye.
Yes. So one point that I want to make that I thought was an interesting observation. Jake is the only one who went out and got a new full-time job, let's say, with another team, right? He got some pretty good term, 7-year
Yep.
contract, and a little bit
Five
of a
and a
pay
half.
bump.
Yep.
He did
Yep.
good. He did good.
He did good for himself. Yeah.
Now, there's one other player I have not mentioned yet, and we're going to talk about him real quick because I'm confused. I gotta say, and again, I don't want to talk to death about this because we're both on the same page. Matt Grzelcyk, I kind of feel bad for him in the sense that he was kind of unceremoniously dumped by Boston at the end of the year, which kind of sucks. Like that hurts, right? He was with Boston for I think 8 years. That doesn't feel good.
BU
Um,
guy,
but
local kid.
Right. But what kind of makes things look like, ugh, it's like with Jake, it's like he's the boyfriend and we broke up and he went and the next person he met, they got married. Good for you. That's what it was meant to be, right? Fine. Poor Matt. We've
Mm.
broken up. He is now not in a good place. He's got like maybe a terrible relationship with someone, or he's like, no offense, but living in his parents' basement eating ramen, right? Because the poor man, all in perspective, right? He had a 3.687 cap hit from his contract that just expired, and it was a long-term contract, and he's gone down to Pittsburgh for a 1-year deal. Now, granted, Pittsburgh was doing a whole bunch of 1 years, so it's probably not personal. But a 1 year with a cap hit of 2.75.
7.5.
So it's a single year and a pay cut. And that
Yeah.
sucks. Like, all right. Because he's not a bad player, right? Like, let's be clear. It wasn't what Boston needed anymore. It wasn't the right place for him anymore. Boston
No.
grew
And
and they moved on. And so he just didn't need to be there anymore. But you don't want to see someone
Pittsburgh
like that
likes,
kind of
no, I
kick
do.
in
I
a
feel
little.
bad for him, as you've said many times about Matt Grzelcyk. When he is good, he's really
Yeah.
good. But when he's
Yeah.
bad,
He's
he's
real
really
bad.
bad. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, I think that inconsistency has played
Mm-hmm.
into this. I think some injury issues have
Yeah.
played into that as well. He's had a difficult time, at least the last couple of seasons, maybe 3,
Mm-hmm.
staying healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And let's face facts, okay?
Mm-hmm.
The reality is, based on what the Bruins have done in free agency,
Yeah.
they want to build their team like the Florida Panthers.
Yes.
Everybody is now wanting to build their team like the Florida Panthers. In
Yeah.
order to do that, you've got to get bigger on the back end.
Yep. 100%.
And
And we've been saying that for years, even
for
before the
years,
Florida
even
Panthers were a
right,
thing. Right.
right. So
Yeah.
it just doesn't fit what you're trying to build.
Exactly. You know, a little bit sad to see Pat Maroon go, but you
Yeah,
know, it
too.
is what it is.
It is
That's
what it
okay.
is. Yeah.
It's fine. Derek Forbert, I think we all knew was kind of going to be going somewhere else. Like he was a great penalty killer, but like just the injuries, it was just too much. And all of those guys got short deals, right? They all got 1-year deals. So I don't really know what to make of that. The biggest surprise and probably biggest disappointment for me was Danton Heinen leaving for a 2-year deal of 2.25 cap hit. I would love to know what the negotiations were like in that case with between his agent and Don, because as we know, we knew leading right up to the finish line that there were talks, right? We've heard in interviews from Don and everything. I think there was a presser ahead of the draft and he was saying, and so the draft was what, Friday? So I don't know if he did this on Friday interview or Thursday last week, and they were still talking. And so I'm like a little confused because it's not like he left to go to Vancouver for 5, 6, 7 years. It's a 2-year contract and it's $2.25 million. So it's like not a ton of money in the grand scheme of things. And quite frankly, we made you. Right? Boston gave him the chance. And now, you know, we talk about loyalty and like how, oh, you should never assume loyalty with your employer and vice versa. But I was a little bit surprised because it was my understanding when he did the PTO that he was like, I'm going to sit and I'm going to wait because I want to be in Boston. He wanted to be in Boston. And so this then happened and I was surprised and a little confused. I don't know. What was your take on that?
Well, I expected him to be a bit of a casualty because we have been asking Don to prioritize team needs.
Yeah.
And in the past, we have had general managers that have spent more than they should have on signing bottom 6 players, Jags. Now, I don't consider Danton Heinen a Jag because he was a very serviceable player. He played a lot better than I expected him to. He got better as the season went along. But at some point in time, you have to look at the upper tier of your roster. And you have to understand what you have to spend. And so, you know, as a result of Danton Heinen playing as well as he did, you could slowly see himself potentially pricing himself out of Boston because of the gaps that we have or had in our current roster. So those are the ones that hurt a little bit more than maybe the Matt Grizzlicks and the Derek Forberts and the Pat Maroons, because the guy can play. He showed he can play, and you could have used him on this roster, but again, at $2.25 million, when you still have your franchise, hopefully your franchise goalie, and we'll get to him, that is waiting in the wings.
Yeah. So
that hurts. It hurts, but it's understandable, and I'm glad he got his money. And he's
definitely. And the last one that I'll mention, Jesper Boquist, he did not receive a qualifying offer, so he became a UFA, and he actually landed in Florida. So good for him. So for Jake DeBrusk, Derek Forbort, Danton Heinen. The Bruins play them for the first time at home November 26th. So that's going to be that first encounter there. Chicago, they go to Chicago on December 4th, and they don't play Chicago at home until April 10th, which is a bit of a surprise. And Pittsburgh, they play them for the first time at home on November 29th. So we'll be seeing pretty much most of these guys again fairly early in the season.
And I'm sure they'll all get their video tributes, as everybody does across the league. Fans will show appreciation, but again, I like the fact that Don Sweeney is moving away from a standard of operating procedure that had become a little bit commonplace. And I know Don's, and I'm referring to Peter Chiarelli, folks, who was just guys like Danton Heinen and let's even Jesper Boquist. He would have signed these guys to too long of a term and too much money. And so we don't have those luxuries anymore.
Exactly. Yep. So on the flip side, the great news, I think, all of the rumors, all the things that we were kind of hoping for, one of them definitely came true. The biggest, I would say, probably not really a surprise, but I mean, I was relieved that the rumor was true and that it came to fruition, and that is bringing Elias Lindholm. We actually have 2 former Vancouver Canucks coming to Boston. So they're taking 3 Boston players and we're taking 2. So Elias Lindholm previously, so he was traded to Vancouver by the deadline this past season from Calgary. And so his previous contract held a 4.85 cap hit. He's 29. And so his new contract is 7 years at 7.7. I think that is a pretty bold vote of confidence from the Boston Bruins organization, because Lindholm, he had a good playoff, but he's been a little bit streaky. But when he played with really good players, like think back to when Tkachuk was in Calgary, Huberdeau or Gaudreau, he was much better. So, think about kind of context, right? I think we kind of talked about this in the live yesterday, and we talk about this in the Discord quite a bit. Just because a player performs in a certain way in one environment doesn't mean that it's going to be copy and paste, right? There's a risk, obviously, of bringing them over, but obviously also Don and his team saw something enough in him to make him such a significant long-term offer. So he's a centerman who, if you haven't watched his interview, his intro to the Boston media, his interview and Nikita Zadorov's interviews, highly recommend. We'll put him in the show notes. But Lindholm did his homework.
Very impressive.
Yeah,
very impressive how they conducted themselves, and speaking about the wanting to be a Boston Bruin, the culture of the Boston Bruins, and and I know some people don't buy into that stuff, but I think it's important. I think it's an extremely important aspect of drawing players here, right? To this area.
Chose to come to Boston. This isn't a trade.
He wanted to be here. He wanted to be here before this, and it seems like maybe going to Vancouver was a bit of a placeholder, for Lindholm.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I think the thing that struck me the most, that stood out from his interview, was the fact that he talked about Bergeron, and not in the sense like, oh, I'm going to come in, I'm going to be the new Bergeron, but rather he knew the role that Bergeron played on the team in regards to his responsibilities on the ice during a game and how he hopes to be able to help fill some of that gap. And to me, that meant that he really had done his homework because he actually knew what Bergeron was doing out there. You know, it wasn't just oh yeah, he was a great guy, reputation, blah, blah, blah. I think you have to watch the game and know it and understand what he did and why he was so successful, how he accomplished all that he did on the ice by actually paying attention to him as a player, right? Not just as a person. And then Zadorov, I didn't know really too much about him at all. I'd only really known about Elias Lindholm because it's just been talked about for so long.
So long. It seems like what? And we've been hearing about Lindholm to Boston for a year at least.
A year. At least a year. And so I was pleasantly surprised with Nikita Zadorov. One, I think, you know, it's kind of the running joke, I always will say at least, that Don Sweeney has 3 kinds of hockey players that he likes to hire. Swedes, sex, and Boston guys.
And BU guys.
Guys from Boston. They either go to college in Boston or
right.
Or they're from the Boston area, right?
As their number 1 draft pick will likely be doing, right?
Right? BC, BU, they're from Harvard, whatever, right? Like, there's got to be a strong Boston connection. So, and the one thing that goes beyond Don Sweeney, even beyond that to Peter Chiarelli, was there have not been a lot of Russians on the Boston Bruins ever, really. Like the last time,
quite a
while. Like when they traded and they got Orlov, that was the first Russian in the better part of a decade, I think. So the fact that he's bringing one in and it's for a really long-term deal. Again, Zadorov got 6 years, $5 million. I was like, oh, that's a little different, but you know what? Maybe that's what they need. The guy is huge. Love that.
Huge.
6'6". He can you imagine him on a pairing with Carlo? Holy God.
He's 6'6", and how much does he weigh? He's 280 something. I mean, he's huge. He's huge.
Enormous. So Merry Christmas, Boston fans. We finally have a gigantic decor. Gigantic.
For the first
Charlie
time.
McAvoy's the smallest one.
Right. I mean, and again, now Zadorov comes with his pros and cons, and you know, sometimes he can get himself caught in some trouble. But I think part of bringing Jay Leach in now, right, with these ginormous bodies, I'm really anticipating and anxiously wanting to see what type of defensive structure is this group is going to bring.
Mm-hmm. And remember,
I'm hoping they're going to be. I'm hoping they're going to be somewhat of a little bit of wrecking balls. To be honest with you.
Yeah, for those of you who grew up with the Mighty Ducks, I mean, I'm hoping we'll have some Bash Brothers out there.
Yeah,
but you know,
I mean,
and the concerns around, you know, maybe some of the behavior, the cultural fit, whatever, you know, he talked a lot about in his interview, the culture and stuff like that. And, you know, we all had those similar concerns about Pat Maroon. We're like, this guy coming in, he's not going to fit in, but he did great, right? He was part of it because that culture in the locker room is so strong, first of all. And second of all, you know, I think we as fans can't necessarily know, again, how much of what we see on the ice is just their on ice persona or who they are. Right. And so, you know, maybe he's playing a role, right. That served him well in whatever locker room cultures he was in before, where it's like, I'm going to get a response if I do it this way, but now I'm going to be in Boston and this is how they behave. And if, you know, he doesn't get the memo, he'll get it fast. Right. So
I'm not worried about
that.
Yes. Yes.
The smallest man on the team will be having words with one of the largest men on the team.
One of the right. So, you know, overall,
Mm-hmm.
I think Don Sweeney has addressed a couple of significant needs.
Yep. Yeah. So, and then, the last one, which I think, I also don't know a lot about, but I think he was kind of brought in as a replacement for Boqvist, Max Jones coming over from Anaheim on a 2-year deal. So he went from a 1.3 cap hit down to a $1 million cap hit, but I think he's going to be a good addition as well. Just because all these really great things that I've heard about him, his attitude, the kind of player he is, the locker room guy that he is. So, and he's a young one, so that's always great too. We do need a little bit more youth on the team. Any other final thoughts before we talk really quickly also then about Swayman? Are you happy with yesterday?
Yes, I am happy with yesterday. Now, the proof will be in seeing how this all plays out.
Yeah.
With rosters and
Mm-hmm.
the makeup of lines. I still would like to see a proven scorer join this team, but I'm not quite sure. Again, at the sake of sounding like a greedy, what, I'm not sure how that will come to be. And you've got bigger business or bigger fish to fry with
Right.
Jeremy Swayman right now.
Yeah. So this is my pitch to you and to anyone else who's nervous or worried. Again, got to have the faith that it's all going to work out. But the good news is, just because we didn't see anything yesterday, just because we didn't see anything today, doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot yet. Okay. The most important thing was that the qualifying offer was issued. And as far as I know, I don't recall the timing of it last year when they have to. I mean, well, they can hold off on signing it, I think, until December. But I'm trying to remember when last year Jeremy rejected it. That sent them into arbitration. But ultimately, what that just does is it buys both parties more time, because of when the qualifying offers were due and the start of free agency being on the same day this year. That was a lot going on. Yep. That was a lot to have happening. So that's not a surprise to me whatsoever. So they did that as a paperwork thing to basically say, okay, we offered to him, so nobody can come in and they gave him a qualifying offer, so no one could come in and give him an offer sheet to take him out elsewhere, right? But there's plenty of time. From the things that I've read online and the things that I've heard, it seems like Don is done spending money. Seems like any of those gaps, they're really going to be giving some of the young guys opportunities to come up, which I think is very smart, very wise.
Yes.
You got
and let's not forget about Matt Poitras, right?
He's going to be back.
He's coming back. My understanding and reading some of what those that are covering the development camp right now is that he looks good skating out there. He's put on some weight.
Yes.
And he's ready to go. Yeah. We also have Justin Brezzo, who showed some really good signs. The more he played, the more confident he became. Yes. That's a big boy right there.
Yeah. And imagine how good Poitras is going to be when he's fully healthy, right? So I think there's nothing to really worry about there. I think there's, so I think the money is there. I think they just bought themselves time to do additional negotiations. So
I just
I'd be worried in August.
I know. Well, so the second window for clubs to file for salary arbitration with eligible RFAs is July 15th. July 15th.
Yeah.
So let's hope
So
it
that's
doesn't come to that.
exactly. Yep. And there's a lot of different ways that they can get to an agreement between now and then. I think besides adding time, I'm sure Don kind of wanted to see what the goalie market was going to dictate value to be, right? So UC Saros just signed his extension in Nashville, and I believe that was for about 7 and change. So I think he kind of wanted to see what's it going to look like for a good player like that. Can it compare to Jeremy Swayman and where he kind of lands on that spectrum of goaltenders? So I would say for folks, don't worry, it's going to be fine. It's in Boston's, at this point, best interest. They've kind of they kind of had to back themselves into this corner by letting go of Linus Ullmark, because they had the opportunity for the trade. Like, you can't pass that opportunity up, because then you don't want to get stuck, and then you have that 5 million or whatever it was that he had, right? So it's like kind of just trying to play the pieces at all the right time. If something changes, we'll have a podcast. We'll probably have a podcast in 2 weeks anyways.
I think we should have to check in. Right. Or when the news breaks that he has been signed.
Yes.
And, I know that there are still people who are pontificating and criticizing the trading of Linus Ullmark simply because of the Korpisalo contract. And
forget it.
I know. I'm not understanding, what is still, up everyone's ass, or a few people's asses, about that. You still need a backup goalie.
Right. If at this point you're still convinced that that was a bad deal, then you're not paying attention and you don't know what you're talking about. Plain and simple. Boston was in a position where they had to get rid of a goaltender. The other teams knew it, so they had the upper hand. And you got a guy who
and you've got a dance partner,
a decent backup goaltender. So, and goalie Bob can work his wonders. So if at this point you think it's still a bad trade, then we're not watching the same.
And sport. You know what? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. However, if you can fix Korpisalo and get him back to his early days when he played for Columbus, guess what, people? You got an asset. You got an asset that you could potentially use at a later date. Right? Exactly. To make another deal. So,
exactly. So I'm super pleased. I'm really excited to see these new guys play. I'm very optimistic about the start of the season. I'll be keeping my eye out on some of the news in the development camp. Be curious to see how many of those guys get invited to regular camp. But other than that, we will get back on here. If at the latest, you said the 15th.
The 15th.
But I would imagine it's not going to be too much longer before we have news. So we'll hop on. We'll record a quick pod when the news comes about how much the Boston Bruins are going to be shelling out for Jeremy Swayman, because it's going to be a chunk of change.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. But he earned it. In my opinion. Maybe others 100%. Think differently, but I think the vast majority of us as fans believe this is what people have been clamoring for.
Yes.
Swayman's the number one. Swayman's the number one. Swayman's the number one. All right, let's get her done. Let's get her done.
Exactly. Yeah. But as always, the highlight of my week, Maria. The highlight of my week, chatting hockey with you.
For both of us, we were both lamenting before we got on air about what a week it's been, but always looks brighter when you have a chance to talk hockey, and good hockey talk,
Absolutely.
because positive steps for our Boston Bruins.
Absolutely. So as always, go Bees.
Go Bees.